Thank you for tuning into this video presented by Help Incorporated. I'm Matthew Stern, Executive Director of Help, and this is a video intended for a Night's Welcome Winter Shelter volunteers. A Night's Welcome is our 21-week shelter program in which Hampton area churches open their doors to our homeless brothers and sisters who have nowhere else to go. This video will present the basic process of the shelter program, some safety guidelines for you as a volunteer, and some suggestions on how to make sure your volunteer experience runs smoothly. First, a quick overview of the program. A Night's Welcome Winter Shelter provides a warm place to sleep, 2 warm meals, and access to basic necessities and services for the street homeless of Hampton. Last year, our average nightly attendance was 46 individuals and ranged from an average of 27 per night to 65 per night. Our largest night overall last year was 78 individuals. Now, we also depend on over 15,000 volunteer hours each season, and these volunteers are assisting with meal preparations, setting up for the week, cleaning up, helping with check-in, staying overnight, and providing other services for our guests. We at Help also work with the folks entering the shelter to find ways to help them get housed. Our goal is to help anyone who is ready and willing to change their situation, and we have a case manager on staff who can assist with just that. One group of volunteers that you'll be working with is the Help Welcome Team, and this is a set of volunteers who have committed one night each week for the entire season to assist churches with the evening processes of checking in guests and helping things run smoothly. Please use them as a resource if you have any questions or have any issues with particular guests. There will be a number of agencies and volunteer groups entering the shelter each week. We have representatives from the Hampton VA Medical Center, the Community Services Board, Healthcare for the Homeless, United Healthcare, and other approved agencies. And all of those approved groups will be listed in the outside agency sign-in book. If a group or an individual is coming to volunteer or enter the shelter that is not in that book, they should not be allowed to enter. All groups must be approved by Help prior to volunteering or visiting the shelter. If you have volunteers who show up unannounced, please contact Help staff to find out how to direct them. Our trailer is set up with enough supplies to accommodate at least 100 individuals for any given week, and this includes 1 mat, 1 blanket, and 1 sheet for up to 100 unique individuals per week. If numbers increase, your Help staff will provide additional bedding to accommodate the large numbers. Now, the trailer also includes a simple first aid kit, toiletries, plenty of socks, and hygiene kits for new guests. Please feel free to distribute toiletries on a regular basis, and socks should be offered to everyone at least once a week, and more often if the weather is wet. Each church has different programs that it will be offering to our guests. Some do Bible studies, some do church services or game nights, bingo, football viewing parties. Some have their choirs perform for our guests and children's groups perform or other fun things for our guests. Some churches will coordinate things like showers and have closed closets available. We encourage you to engage your guests in unique ways. Occasionally, Help will receive coats and clothes from various clothing drives, and we try to make sure that these are available to our guests at our churches. We'll bring the clothes and give our guests a finite amount of time to go through them, and then we'll take them and take the rest of them to a local clothing closet. Now, here's an overview of the schedule. Around 5:30 p.m., the Help Welcome Team will show up. The Welcome Team are volunteers who will be showing up on a specific night of the week for the entirety of the program, and they are a resource as they're more familiar with the shelter processes and are there to help with any safety and disciplinary issues, as well as to help the church have a great shelter experience. At 6 p.m., our guests will begin to check in. Registered guests will have a Help-issued ID card with a Night's Welcome 2019-2020 on it, as well as their barcode. And this barcode will be used at check-in. In years past, we have used the Help-issued ID numbers for our guests. And as our organization continues to work to make our homeless brothers and sisters part of our community and our families, we're going to also utilize their names on the bags instead of those numbers. Giving them a number, while it requires a little less writing, kind of contradicts our work in trying to ensure that our homeless neighbors are called by their given names. At the end of the day, we are in the dignity business, and our neighbors shouldn't have to sacrifice their dignity just to receive the help that's due to them. Around 6:30, dinner should be served. We ask that you would please pray before each meal or ask guests to please bless the food. Feel free to fellowship with guests during this time, and if you're eating, try eating with one of the guests and getting to know them. Generally, we will have people using the shelter that work regular jobs and may not be able to get back in time for regular dinner service. So we do ask that you save a plate of food for those who are signed up on the late arrival list. That way we can ensure they receive a meal and aren't penalized for working or being out late for an approved activity. Many of our churches offer Bible studies, bingo, game nights, and other activities. These generally begin after dinner. One thing HELP does not support is forced evangelism, and we do ask that a space will be provided for anyone who wishes not to participate in a religious activity. So after dinner and activities, we do try to accommodate one tobacco use break. This is one chance for people to get outside and have a smoke if that's something they do. If your church is a non-smoking campus or chooses not to provide a smoke break, that's okay, and that's completely your choice as a church. We will ensure that that information is communicated to our guests upon entry. If you do offer a smoke break, we limit it to 15 minutes or less. The welcome team will normally take a significant role in this part of the night. We ask that you would keep an eye on guests who are exiting to smoke to make sure that they aren't wandering off and doing anything that they shouldn't be doing. Designating a specific area is helpful to keep track of those going out to smoke. Guests are required to clean up their own cigarette butts, and any littering will mean that smoke breaks will be discontinued. Our goal this year is to offer the smoke break sometime just before bedding is distributed, say around 7:45. That way there can be a streamlined process as people re-enter the building after the break. They can just pick up their linens and mats and find a place for the night. Around 8 p.m., we do ask that bedding is distributed to our guests. Each guest will receive a white kitchen bag with their name written on it, a blanket, and a sheet. This will be their bag and their bedding for the entire week that they'll be there. Again, there will be at least 100 mats on the trailer, so we'll have enough for each guest to have one mat. Quiet time begins around 9 p.m., at which time everyone should begin to lay down to sleep. Anyone wishing to or needing to stay up past 9 p.m. engaging in a noisy activity can be offered another space away from the sleeping area. If there are no areas to be used, then quiet will be required. As guests sleep, it's important to have someone who is still awake to ensure that no issues occur. Some guests may also ask for a wake-up call to prevent alarms waking everybody else up. Please honor these requests, as many of these folks are trying to get out to work. Sometime between 5:30 and 6 a.m., guests will begin to wake up and breakfast would be served. Your preparation for breakfast and being ready to serve by about 6:15 is helpful in getting people out of the door. Guests will then clean up their bedding, placing it back in their own bag and storing it wherever linens are to be stored. Mats are also to be picked up and put away if need be. Some churches have large enough facilities as do not require mats to be picked up every night, and others do not, and mats are placed in one spot while the shelter is empty. Please ensure that guests take all of their belongings with them as they leave. HELP nor our host churches are responsible for anyone's belongings left at a church. We have to ensure that people take their belongings, or else guests will bring more than they can transport on the last day, or leave it to be dealt with by somebody else. We do require that a guest be able to transport all of their belongings out in the mornings. So let's go over a few important rules to keep in mind. Once a guest enters the shelter, they are there for the night. There is no coming or going or eating and leaving without staying. This includes going back out to vehicles. So if people enter in and they have things left in their car, they need to get it then before they check in. Guests are only allowed to enter the shelter up until 9 p.m. unless there has been express prior approval on the late arrival list. Anyone arriving after 9 p.m. needs to be turned away. This helps us prevent guests who are on the ban list or may be intoxicated from re-entering the shelter. Our welcome team is a critical part of the check-in process, and they will know guests from their week-to-week interactions with them, and that's why they are present for check-in for the entire time. Once the welcome team leaves, only individuals on the late arrival list for that night are to be let in. HELP has a zero-tolerance policy with regards to intoxication. Our welcome team will be using a breathalyzer this year to avoid any confusion whatsoever. The welcome team will be looking out for those issues and ask people to leave if necessary. And if you notice anybody who's intoxicated, please make sure you let the welcome team know. HELP will also be doing random bag checks each week to prevent unwanted items entering the shelter. Our welcome team will oversee this and may ask for a few volunteers to give a hand if needed. Guests are required to register fully with HELP and receive their own registration card within 3 days of their first night's stay. Individuals will be turned away from the shelter if they have not complied with the registration requirements. We will have our shelter coordinator on site regularly to help with on-site registrations. There will be an easy way to tell who has been there 3 nights this year because upon their first entry, they will receive a card with punch holes in it, and after all 3 holes are punched, they are not allowed in. We do allow cell phones and devices to be used inside the shelter, but they must be on silent or be connected to headphones. And after 9 p.m., devices may not bother other people by sound or by light. Again, a guest must take all of their belongings with them when they exit the shelter the next morning. We do require that both volunteers and guests act in respectful manners at all times. If anyone is disrespectful on either side, it creates issues that make shelter a lot harder on everybody involved. If you are treated with disrespect or see someone treating another person disrespectfully, we ask that you please speak up and tell someone, like a welcome team member. We expect people to have basic human decency while both helping with and staying at our shelters, and we reserve the right to ask any guest to leave at any time. As a volunteer, you should always be aware of your situation you find yourself in. Please ensure that you are not alone in a room with another guest. Please be sure that you keep any of your valuables in a safe location. While we do have many good people who use our shelters, and I mean many good people, we do have people who will take advantage of any opportunity that's in front of them. And we do ask that volunteers not give guests money directly. And if you see a need that you'd like to take care of, please let a help team, someone on the help team know, and we can funnel the donation through help to avoid any appearances of favoritism or unfairness. If there is a medical concern that requires anything more than a simple bandage, please call EMS to come address the situation. They know we have shelter going on and are there to help. Help does try to provide some over-the-counter medications for our guests. Now, we do require them to sign a waiver when they receive them, as we only make those medications available, and we make no diagnosis, allergy, or dosage guarantees. And the combination for that section of the box with the medications in it will be highly regulated and will not be given out to all volunteers, just to add to the level of regulation. If there's ever a situation where you, other volunteers, or guests feel threatened, or a situation is escalating out of control, please feel free to call the Hampton Police. We are not here to physically enforce rules or argue with guests. Let me repeat that. We are not here to physically enforce the rules or argue with guests. If guests will not comply with the rules to the point that they are a problem and have been asked to leave and will not, the police will gladly escort them out. A few years ago, one of our guests reminded me of our responsibility to respect the personal space of the individuals entering our shelter. He said, and I quote this is not a petting zoo. Not everyone wants to be touched, so we should err on limiting our physical contact to offering handshakes. We don't want to hug, touch a shoulder, or anything like that because we just don't know the people enough to enter their personal space. And just because we assume our contact is friendly doesn't give us the right to assume someone else will see it that way. If the guest initiates and you feel comfortable with a hug or something of the sort, that is perfectly acceptable. But as a general rule, we ask that you try to avoid violating someone's personal space. Sometimes we'll have people who want to enter the shelter to see a friend, find a family member, look to see who's there, try to sell things to our guests, and a number of other reasons. If individuals or groups are not listed on our outside agency sign-in list, then they are not approved to enter and should be denied. If the police or detectives show up to the front door, they too are to be denied entry unless they are responding to an emergency call from your shelter. If they are coming to look for an individual or issue a warrant, please call me or my case manager directly, and those numbers will all be all over the place. You'll definitely be able to find them. All interactions with law enforcement that you do not initiate need to go through our organization. The reason we do this is to avoid any conflicts when it comes to specific churches or anything like that. So if the police department's ever going to have an issue, they can have an issue with help and not your particular church. We want to respect our guests' right to privacy. It is no one's business that they are staying at a homeless shelter. If someone comes looking for an individual, you can take a message, but we cannot confirm or deny that someone has or is staying at the shelter. And the easiest rule of all, if you have questions or concerns, you can always call me directly. My phone number is listed in the host site manual, and on all of our help volunteers and church leaders should have my direct number. It'll be listed on the front of a number of books that are around. I want to express my sincere thanks for your volunteering in a Night's Welcome program. This is our chance to literally be the hands and feet and the heart of Christ to those who are homeless right here in Hampton. So thank you, and let's have a great year.